fast forward, you had a great entrepreneurial career, and then you ended up working for the government. And then comes your first crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about why that moment is important for our history?
During the Cuban Missile Crisis, I was actually working here in Silicon Valley at a defense electronics company. And I was called up, but I was also doing some pro bono consulting for the government in the field of technical missiles, technical factors about missiles. And I was called up one day and asked to come back to Washington for an urgent consulting job. And I said, sure, I'll rearrange my schedule and fly back, see you next Monday. He said, no, you don't understand. I need to see you right away. So I got on the red eye and flew back to Washington. The next morning, he took me into his office and, to my amazement, showed me pictures of Soviet missiles being deployed in Cuba. And that was my first introduction to what came to be called the Cuban Missile Crisis. And for the next 8 days and nights, I worked on a small team of analysts looking at all the intelligence information coming in to try to determine the status of those missiles. How big were they? How far could they fly? When were they going to be operational? And that report went every morning on the desk of President Kennedy, who then used that as one of the factors to decide what he should be doing that day. I guess my bottom line is that every day I went into that analysis center, I believed would be my last day on Earth. That's how close we came to a nuclear catastrophe at that time. And I still believe, to this day, that we avoided that nuclear catastrophe as much by good luck as by good management.
We have learned some lessons in that particular episode, and we're talking about the era of the Cold War, the big polarization. They sort of de-escalated in the historical moment, and people thought that, well, we can control these weapons. But these are extremely complex systems. We have here Google engineers in the audience, and we're talking about many components in this system. There's a lot of engineering, there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of computer control that goes into that. Can anybody actually guarantee, the safety of such a complex system? Even if we had the will to say, oh, we're not going to launch first or whatnot, I think you had an episode, right, which shed some light on that.
No, the short answer to your system is no, we cannot guarantee it. And I've had several experiences in my own life that dramatize the point, but I'll share just one with you. At this time, I was in the Pentagon. I was the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. And I got a call. This is 1978. And I got a call one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I picked up the phone, barely awake. And the general on the other end of the line introduced himself as the watch officer at the North American Air Defense Command. And he said, my computers are showing 200 ICBMs on the way from the Soviet Union to the United States. I'll tell you, I woke up right away. Talk about a bucket of cold water in the face. And one of the first things I thought about, why in the world is he calling me? I was not in the chain of command. I was in charge of research and engineering at the Pentagon. He was calling me because he had already determined, happily, there was a false alarm. And the question he was asking me is, what's wrong with my computer? What the hell is happening here? Well, the short answer is I could not, over the telephone, figure out what was wrong with his computers. It took us 2 days to find out what had happened. And what had happened was the sergeant who came in for his new watch that evening, instead of putting the operating tape into the computer, had put a training tape into the computer. And so what we got is a very realistic simulation of a launch. It was human error. No matter how complex your systems are, they're always subject to human error. A second one, I didn't get called in the middle of the night, but I was involved in trying to fix the problem after it happened, was the watch officer was seeing 2 missiles on the way, 22 missiles on the way, 222 missiles on the way. He figured, really very wisely, something was wrong with his equipment, he was right. And it took us a day or two to figure out what was wrong with it and how to fix it. So I was personally familiar with an example of human error and an example of equipment error. We did not launch, which is the good news. The reason we did not launch, beside the watch officer suspecting something was wrong, which in the second case was easy, but the first case was really pretty hard, was nothing bad was going on in the world at that time. And I've always asked myself on that first case, what if? What if it had occurred during a crisis? What if it occurred during the Cuban Missile Crisis? What if it occurred during the Sinai crisis, which had occurred earlier, where we were at high alert, expecting some kind of a launch? In that case, would we have gone ahead and actually launched our missiles and accidentally started a nuclear war? So our subjects then, our systems then and now are subject to those kind of errors. The technical factor which exacerbates that is that one of our sets of nuclear missiles, namely our ICBMs, or intercontinental missiles, are subject to being destroyed in their silos if they're not launched. So if the watch officer reports to the president that his system is showing a launch underway, an attack on the United States, the president has about 10 minutes to decide whether he should order the launch of our ICBMs so that the missiles will be gone by the time the strike occurs. About 10 minutes. And obviously his decision is going to be heavily influenced by what's actually going on in the world at the time. So besides all this technical duplication and triplication and so on, besides all the sophisticated procedures we have, there's always the question of context. Context, what's happening in the world, which will affect the president's decision. He has about 10 minutes to digest that context plus the technical information to decide what to do. That was true then, it is still true today.